Will democracy survive in the next couple of years?
And essentially, we are the same.
And there are so many needs that Minnesota has.
What people are saying they need right now.
Access to Democracy is made possible in part by a donation from Firefly Credit Union. Firefly is the new name of U.S. Federal Credit Union, which has proudly served the financial needs of the greater Twin Cities community since 1925. At Firefly, we guide our members forward and give them the power to chase dreams by delivering the financial solutions they need to get ahead. From checking accounts to mortgages, we'll light the way. We are Firefly Credit Union, and this is life illuminated. By Thomson Reuters, providing legal professionals with intelligence, technology, and human expertise they need to find trusted answers. Thomson Reuters, the answer company. Online at thomsonreuters.com. And Dr. Charles Crutchfield of award-winning Crutchfield Dermatology in Eagan. Acknowledged as one of the nation's best physicians, a Minnesota native who trained at the Mayo Clinic, Dr. Crutchfield personally treats all patients and states that experience counts and quality matters. Crutchfield Dermatology, look good, feel great, with beautiful skin.
Welcome. Access to Democracy returns. Alan Miller with you, and we have a guest who's a return guest, Mark Frascone, and he's with Indivisible. He's the local leader of Indivisible, which is a citizens resistance group. Grew up after the 2016 election, and why don't you tell us a little bit about you and about Indivisible?
Sure. Yeah, I loved it, and thanks for having me back again, Alan. It's this is the third trip back, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk about our group and the work that we do here in the Senate District 51, which is basically covers the area of Eagan and Burnsville. We've started out as a group of activists that grew out of the Senate District in response to Trump getting elected in 2016, and we knew that we needed to form some form of resistance. Personally, I was a Bernie Sanders supporter, and it was kind of a flip of the coin whether I wanted to try to start up an Our Revolution group or an Indivisible group. And I found that the Indivisible movement was taking hold a lot more quickly, and so I got involved with them, and we were able to grow a group up. Right now we're a little over 500 members that are actually active with the group. And
that's locally?
Locally, yes.
Right.
And I think our influence is felt a little bit further across the state now because of a number of people pay attention. When they hear our name, they know who we are. So we were successful in that regard in showing up, and actually I've noticed now the congressman whose job we took a role in helping to replace. He's now running for state senator, remembers us and tags us quite often in his tweets and comments. So we're casting a bit of a shadow yet over him. But what we were was basically a group that was formed to advocate to the federal delegation of Minnesota. So we were working towards communicating with our congressional delegation as well as our state senators. Fortunately, we had two good state senators that would listen to us, and we had no problem communicating with. And the only person that we really were having a difficulty with was our Republican congressman. And fortunately, that worked out really well for us.
In this area, yes, we now have Angie Craig, and Angie has been everything that she promised to be, and then more. She's just done a wonderful job.
Yeah, well, I was actually just chatting with someone just before we came in here, and the thing is, at the end of the day, and it's fun to look at it in the retrospect, while we were doing it, there were so many things going on. We had town halls, we had protest events, we were showing up all over town at different things. And at the end of the day, when you look back on it and someone says, well, how did it work? Because we get a lot of questions, like, what did you do? All we ever did was ask him to show up to something and to respond to us. And he wasn't able to do either of those things. And so when you see Angie Craig going around, I don't know, she's had 10 town halls now. I mean, she's everywhere. She's always out meeting with constituents.
Every weekend she's in a different community.
Always.
And she's had all her town halls. She's been here multiple times. And contrary to the way she conducts her office, At times, I couldn't get an answer, and certainly never got a response to appear on the show from her predecessor. He just wouldn't.
I was, I don't want to think of myself as being too important, but I was a co-chair. Sarah Chapman is also a co-chair of the group. I was a co-chair of this group for 5 years, and I've written hundreds of emails and letters to him, and showed up at his office dozens of times, and asked for him personally to show up at town halls that we arranged, where all he had to do was show up and answer questions. And in all this time, and it's been 3 years now since I first started trying to communicate with him, never responded to me, not once.
Yeah. We can say the same thing, and of course he's not even a resident of this congressional district, so
No.
that tells you something. How about a little bit of background on you?
Well, sure. I'm a lifelong resident of Minnesota. I love the state, although we would talk a little bit about some of the problems with that we see. But I'm a lifelong scout. I started out in the Cub Scout movement, was a Boy Scout, became an explorer before I enlisted in the military, and I served 7 years active duty in the Coast Guard and was honorably discharged. I worked for the post office for over 20 years, and then went back to school late in life and became an information security analyst. I've always had an eye towards activism. I was a union steward while I worked at the post office. I filed thousands of grievances, pertaining to, worker rights, that type of thing. And so I've always been on that side of things. Never been quite as involved as after Trump got elected, and that's when I think, things became more important for me, and I.
Well, there was no Indivisible before Trump
No.
became elected. I mean, this is a grassroots movement that grew up all over the country, and I know that there are middle tier groups. There's almost 500 of them. There are hundreds of upper tier and lower tier groups, and we're talking about tens of thousands of people who have become involved in Indivisible. Interestingly enough, at the time we booked you to appear today, we had no knowledge that Trump was going to be here yesterday for, I guess, I won't call it a speech, but I would call it a fundraising tour.
More of a horror show, really, if you watched it.
I did not. I haven't seen it. I will do it in bits and pieces, I think. But I know some of the things that I heard about it or read about it were pretty frightening, such as his instigating cheers against our Somali population, which
my heart dropped when I was watching this, and of course I have difficulty watching Trump most of the time because he starts right out by lying. He started out by saying they had a record crowd in the center and the rafters were all empty, and that there was 50,000 people outside waiting to get in, supporters, and there was anywhere near
well,
that.
I know his campaign said they printed 72,000 tickets for his appearance here yesterday, which is strange in a forum that really only seats a little over 20,000. Why would you print 50,000 additional tickets?
Because a lot of progressives asked for tickets and decided not to show up, and so I don't know. But the part where he came and he actually got Minnesotans, my fellow Minnesotans, to cheer or to boo people who are from Somalia, not for anything other than the fact that they were from Somalia.
Now, I don't know if they were necessarily fellow Minnesotans, because I know they bussed people in from a lot of different areas yesterday to, present a crowd. And I don't think that necessarily is representative of fellow Minnesotans.
I still hope you're right.
Yeah. And so let's talk about Indivisible a little bit. It's sort of a loose organization, even though now you've had meetings and you've had conventions and you do have some rules that you follow. But it's all focused on the Trump regime, and I use the word regime advisedly. What does Indivisible feel about Affordable Care Act?
Oh, the majority of us are personally advocating for single-payer health care. Universally throughout our group, people are advocating for better health care than what we've been getting under the Republicans. You know, of course, we saw the effort to throw 30 million people off of their health care. And so there's, you know, there's a wide range of discussion going on now, of course. And so people are looking at this more closely than they ever had. And I'm, you know, actually just grateful at the end of the day that we're having this discussion finally. And but I am personally on board for a universal health care system that everyone in, no one's out, and we're all covered.
And I think most Americans feel that way also.
It's the only fair thing.
Without restrictions on pre-existing conditions and the ability, as we have now, for children to stay on their parents' plan at least until they're 26 years of age. I mean, these things are important things, and these are things that other countries, not necessarily democracies, but other countries afford to their citizens, in many cases, I might say in most cases, without cost, or certainly the cost is minimal. It's there, and I know
Well,
the naysayers talk about, well, in Canada you have to wait 6 months for an operation. The fact of the matter is you don't if it's an emergency. You wait 6 months for cosmetic surgery, or you wait a few months for a non-emergency procedure. But the medical care is there, as it is in England, as it is in Germany, as it is in France, as it is in Spain, as it is in the countries that we used to call our allies, although this president doesn't seem to do that.
Well, that's the frustrating thing is after you begin to look at healthcare as it, you know, exists throughout the world, all of the other modern nations in the world have been able to figure out how to make this work, and for some reason we're being told that we can't afford it. Now, when you look at the numbers, we're spending almost twice as much as the Canadians are spending. There's already a built-in money to be saved from switching to a better healthcare system than what we have, and so that, you know, it just doesn't make any sense to not.
And not to be able to bargain for pharmaceuticals is really outrageous. To have to be hit with the type of prices that we've been hit. Insulin's a perfect example.
Keep hearing about those folks that have died rationing
We
their
have people
insulin.
who have died because they couldn't afford to take the full dose of their insulin. I mean, and you know, that is not what you would expect from a country that used to be the leader in the world in so many areas, although I think if you polled other countries now, they would have a different view of that, unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately.
And I have a medication that I have to get from Canada because it's 1/4 to 1/8 the cost of what it would be here. Does that make sense? It doesn't make sense.
No, it makes no sense. It makes no sense at all, and there's so much profit built into our system, and we seem to be okay with it. Let's just continue this for-profit system where the people that are providing the health care, their incentive is making money and not you getting better. It makes no sense to have that set up that way.
Now, where does Indivisible stand on gun safety?
Well, I should clear that up. You know, Indivisible as a whole gives direction for groups, but the groups are really, you know, like you had mentioned, we're more we're independent of each other. You know, we follow the lead in, you know, we're all progressive in nature, but as far as things like gun, there's a wide range of opinions on that. We work very closely with gun advocacy groups, you know, or I shouldn't say gun advocacy, groups that advocate for greater restrictions on guns, you know,
Gun safety.
gun safety groups.
Yeah.
So our membership, you know, ranges from people who, you know, think we should melt down all guns to people who think, you know, we can pass some sensible gun laws. And so, you know, as a whole, I don't know that we advocate specifically to a particular idea in that, but I think, you know, generally you'll see our approach to that is going to be more progressive.
I mean, a background check seems to be a no-brainer to me.
Yep. Well,
And I don't want to take anybody's gun away, and I don't want anybody to take my guns away, but I think we have to have a little bit of a handle on who can get a gun and have a gun, And, you know, if you've been convicted of a violent crime, if you're a domestic abuser, if you have a psychiatric history that indicates you could be a danger, I don't think that those people should necessarily be armed.
No, and you know, there has to be better ways of doing the things that we're doing. I mean, at the end of the day, my thinking is if we can't figure out a way to keep our children from being murdered while they're in school, then it's time to melt the guns down. So if we're not smart enough to come up with a solution for that, then it's time to melt them all down. So, you know, that's the challenge I put out to the folks that are afraid that we're going to take their guns away and government's going to ruin their lives. Put your thinking caps on and come up with something a little bit better, because at the end of the day, there's not a single American, Republican, Democrat, Independent, that wants to see another child murdered in their classroom.
And we've had far, far too many of those, and no question. Let's say college-educated women seem to be a large part of the backbone of Indivisible. Nationwide, I don't know how it is here.
You know, women are the backbone of the resistance movement, period. This resistance has been born on the desire of womankind to finally lift themselves up to the point where they deserve to be. And so I would say in our group, the active women in our group comprise about 70% of the group. And so really the males, we're a bit of the anomaly. There's a lot of men in the group, but I would say that the more active people are the women of the group. They're really the ones that are doing the lion's share of the lifting. You look out in the community, what's taken place, there was a time when we first organized ourselves where we branded everything that we did, and we kept it pretty much in-house, and all of our events were our events. We've grown and started working with some of the other resistance groups in the area, and so now we take more of a participatory role in those plannings, that type of thing. So you know, the branding of it and the specifics of things are not something that we do anymore. We're really more working towards being part of the larger group and directing the conversation in a more progressive direction.
Voter registration and participation, where are you on that?
Well, we want to do as much of that as we possibly can, because that's where we see the special sauce of winning all the elections, is just getting people to show up. I don't, you know, at the end of the day, we want to go out and we talk about this all the time, knocking on doors, making phone calls, you know, getting people to show up. We don't have to ask them what their politics are, because without guessing, 7 out of 10 people in Minnesota are going to be a progressive person. Really, at the end of the day, we got 3 out of 10 people that are going to be voting for Trump. You know, maybe 3.3 out of 10 people. If we just go out
and I wonder, as things are going right now, if that's not an overstatement of support.
Yeah, it might be. I hope to God it is. I hope that number is waning. But, you know, really what we see, you know, not so much here in Minnesota, because we've got good participation here, but we can still grow it. You know, I mean, 70-80% is good, but there's still, you know, 20-30% of our voters that are staying home that really would push us over the top. So, because those, you know, 7 out of 10 of those folks are progressive voters. We get them to show up. We just say, just show up. We don't care who you vote for. You know, we know, I mean, the math is in our side with that. We're going to win progressive elections, because the majority of people are progressive. They want better health care. They want their kids to be educated correctly. They want clean drinking water. They want the planet to survive another 20 years. I mean, you know, this is all no-brainer stuff. And so we just got to get everybody, you know, kind of woke and to turn out for this kind of thing.
All right. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Where are you on that?
Well, that's a great question. You know, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, I mean, you know, we tend to kind of start taking real hardcore sides on either side. You know, like we're for a wall, we're against a wall, but at the end of the day, you really do need some sort of policy down there to regulate the flow of people coming into your country, to identify people who need help. You know, certainly not putting people in cages.
I think we all feel that way. We just can't just open up blind borders. I don't want to see moats between us and neighboring countries with snakes and alligators in them. And I abhor barbed wire fences and 30-foot walls. But we do have to have some kind of control. And yet America has always been the haven for the oppressed, the haven for people who are threatened in their own countries. And, you know, if we can't continue that, if we can't be compassionate in that area, then we're really losing a lot of what we are and what we stood for.
Certainly, and that's the thing, is at the end of the day, you know, if we have to be that shining light beside the door for folks that are coming here. But then we also have to remember, why are they coming here? And that's a good question that we need to ask, right? Where are they coming from? Well, they're coming from some countries where we're doing things that are causing their governments to fail. And so if we want to really have a solution to this problem, it's not locking down a wall down there. It's you know, we got to quit meddling in these local governments down in South and Central America, where we causing these democratic elected governments to fail, and then we see these right-wing regimes like Bolsonaro and Maduro. You know, we see this instability, and then the people are suffering, and then they come to our door. Well, you know, we need to help them through that.
And we can't respond by cutting off aid to these countries, because the aid is what helped them foster a decent life and ultimately move toward a democratic life. When you take it away, that just allows the despots to really get more entrenched.
Yeah, we're seeing that a lot in, you know, especially in Venezuela and some of those places where, you know, it is getting more desperate for the citizens down there, and so people are fleeing, and they're coming to our door, and you know, we're treating them like animals.
And breaking up families and putting them in cages is just so abhorrent to everything that we have stood for since our founding, that it really is. And we've made some bad mistakes, as we did with the Japanese in World War II, but the fact of the matter is that it's just not representative of us. And what this administration has done in that regard just flies against every feeling that you have of good conscience. So, border security funding, obviously you're for that, but with the limitations that we just talked about.
Yeah, the 25 or 50 billion dollars or whatever the price tag is going to be for this wall is kind of silly. You know, there's ways, and everyone will tell you there's much better ways to lock that region down, or to have some control down there, than to build a big, ridiculous medieval wall.
Well, we have so much available in terms of modern techniques that, you know, we don't need a wall.
No.
The Chinese needed it 2,000 years ago.
Didn't work that hot for them.
It didn't work out that well.
No.
It's true. It's true. The question of impeachment.
Oh, good question. Yeah. So that actually, if there's one thing that's kind of got everybody, you know, the impeachment. Well, Mueller report. So Mueller report to impeachment. You know, what is this? Is this, you know, is this important? I'm concerned personally, and I'm going to diverge a little bit from the Indivisible take on things, but I'm concerned that this is too narrowly focused. I feel that this president has been committing all sorts of crimes, and I think we keep getting pigeonholed into looking at something too narrowly so that we can't catch him. And so I don't understand. You know, I'm not a legal scholar, so I don't understand, you know, that maybe this is a better thing than I see it being. But you know, I think open hearings about all of the crooked dealings of this president are important, you know, so, because I don't know that we're going to be able to, you know, they think they can impeach by Thanksgiving. I think there's a rumor about that. I don't know that they're going to be able to accomplish that, and in the end we're going to probably end up having to vote this guy out of office. So all of the open hearings would actually help us accomplish that, because people could see what a crook he was.
Well, every day when you think, I just can't imagine anything else surfacing, sure enough, something that you never thought of surfaces, such as the arrest yesterday of these two nationals from, I don't know, I think, I'm not even sure.
Soviet bloc, yeah, it was, yeah. I remember reading that too, yes.
It just never ceases to amaze me and to frighten me, and it never ceases to stop with him. The buck stops there, and that's all he's interested in, is the buck.
Yeah, well, and so that's the other thing too. Is like every day it's something new. It's a new outrage, and then you get to a point you're like, well, which one of these are actually planted so that we're not paying attention to what's really important? I mean, we have to ask ourselves this question, because a lot of the types of ploys that we're seeing are almost, you know, they're like mafia level type activity of bait and switch. And so, we have to start being better at discerning what's important. What is the noise that he's throwing out there that we really need to be paying attention to?
You're absolutely right. And now we have many candidates who are seeking the Democratic nomination. Does Indivisible take positions on candidates either pre-primary or, well, afterwards? I'm pretty sure, but
our group won't. We will support the endorsed candidates. So we've kind of taken a position locally to not endorse and to push our. We try to drive progressive discussions, and so in that way cause candidates to adopt more progressive positions. But we want the process to play itself out. It's a good process, the democratic process, the primary, the general election. It has value, and so we see our role as participating in it. And by giving out endorsements, I think we're trying to use our weight to sway it, and we don't want to do that.
Do you have a website?
Our local group does. It's actually still on Facebook. We are the Indivisible Resistance of Eagan and Burnsville. So if you search for that on Facebook, you will come to our site. And that's
so if somebody wanted to join or get in touch with you, that's the best way to do it?
Yes, Indivisible Resistance of Eagan and Burnsville. Search for us on Facebook. And we also have a Twitter account, IREB_resist at Twitter. And those are the two best ways to contact our group.
And what are you doing to encourage voter participation?
Well, so we were going to be doing some tabling at various locations. We actually just had a leadership meeting. We were talking about this. We want to do some tabling and some informational picketing, like at bus stops and locations where we know of high traffic type of things where we can get people out. We really have been talking about partnering with the League of Women Voters because this is really in their wheelhouse. And being a nonpartisan group, we want to encourage that. Again, this kind of feeds into our theory that just getting people to turn out to vote will 7 out of 10 times get a progressive voter out.
And when you say nonpartisan, I know that you have people of all political parties and persuasions who have joined Indivisible because they are frightened by this administration and what they see from it. So, it's not restricted to just progressives. It's really an organization, as I understand it, that's open to anybody who wants to see this nation forge ahead and to uphold the traditions that we grew up with.
That's most certainly correct. And initially our group was populated with primarily Democrats, DFL people locally, but we have since grown to where we have independents and Republicans, and we are we do attract people from across the political spectrum, and that's our beauty, because people who are certainly fed up with Republicans or who are also having difficulty with the establishment Democrat Party find a home with us because they can be themselves, they can be an independent and not have to toe a party line on either side.
The big tent is Indivisible, and Mark Frascone is the one of the local leaders, and thank you very much for coming in and sharing with us.
Thank you, Alan. It was a pleasure to be on again.